right, perfect. All right, and just again, let me know in the chat where you guys are all coming from today. I'll give it maybe a minute to log in. But today we are talking about something really important. So in the proposal industry experts community, we think a lot about the future. We think a lot about where this industry is going, what this career is going to look like, and just macro and micro changes that are occurring in procurement and the sales industry in general. And a lot of that kind of revolves around this kind of growing concern, or not concern, but like this growing interest in how sales enablement should be interacting with proposals. And today, we are joined by two veritable champions in the industry, Josh Ellars and Stephanie White, who are fantastic speakers in this space. Stephanie, in fact, has been named one of the 2023 ones to watch. Josh does an immense amount of work in this space. So I will turn it over to them to talk, and then maybe we can prompt you with some questions and some concerns that have come out of the PI community. All right. Josh, if you want to introduce yourself.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you all for joining. Great to be here with you. I know I've spent a little bit of time with this community, so great to be back. I've got about 15 years of technical sales experience. And then even before that, I even have some time knocking doors, selling pest control services. So roughly 19 years of sales enablement, proposals, really revenue growth for distinct and diverse companies. And it'll be fun to talk with Stephanie about some of the mindset and future-facing visibility that we have into this industry. So great to be with you.
Amazing. And I see some familiar names already in the chat, which is awesome. I'm excited to talk about this for a few reasons. One, yes, obviously, I work in revenue enablement. For those who don't know, I am one of the louder voices, it seems, sometimes in the rooms when we are getting passionate about who owns things like coaching, who owns the sales process, and how we can make all those things better. But what you may or may not know is I also work at one of the leading sales response proposal softwares in the space, that being Loopio. And so for me, this conversation is twofold. It is coming at it from the perspective of enablement's evolving. What do we need to be doing that we're not doing today? What do we need to be thinking of 6 months from now? And how do proposals fit into all that as part of the bigger scheme of generating more money? And likely a lot of you who are joining today are looking to do more with less in this year. So we are going to dig into that, maybe get a little bit spicy, eh? What do we think?
Absolutely.
Let's go.
I'm all for my spice. All right. So let's set some guardrails around how big this conversation is going to get, because I know that we can talk about a lot of things. So first off, we're just going to do some quick overviews on sales enablement, what's happening in the industry right now, some myths around that. And then Stephanie and Josh are going to enlighten us on how enablement can drive proposals, move stuff forward. We'll talk a little bit about future context, and then close it out with the Q&A session for everyone. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh, interesting. So let's talk about selling since the pandemic. So we all know we got shut down. I had to move to this fantastic basement suite that you see behind me to work out of. But what are the other changes that have occurred in the industry? Josh, would you want to lead off there?
There's a lot that's happened, as we know, since early 2020. And a couple things that are paramount in my mind are the following. Number one, there's been a move from a terminology standpoint from sales to revenue. It's a slight move, and you'll see people on the market talking about it. If you look at Stephanie's title, it says revenue enablement, not sales enablement. And it's really about growing this revenue ecosystem within a company. And I've seen this happen. Maybe the pandemic was not the start of it. It may have been starting before, but I believe that there has been an acceleration of this movement. If you look at even just titles, for example, obviously we have and have had for a long time the Chief Revenue Officer title. That person houses multiple roles within their organization, including the operations, the sales team, proposals, sometimes marketing, of course, revenue enablement, etc. But the visibility of the revenue growth engine within a company has been, I think, broadcast to multiple departments, whereas before, I believe there was a little more of a siloed nature to a business where this is the marketing team, this is the sales team, this is operations, this is enablement, this is product, this is engineering, this is proposals, etc. So the unification of these roles as revenue drivers, a lot of you have heard me talk about, and I think even on one of these webinars, I had you repeat after me, I create revenue as a proposal manager. And that's something that we have to really remember. So that's one. The second is for revenue professionals, the pandemic, at least initially, made it more difficult to connect with prospects, right? Phone numbers, for example, office phone numbers were irrelevant because no one was in the office. So the way in which we reached out to people to create and close opportunities was significantly threatened, and a lot of diverse ways to kind of connect with buyers. Social media has also kind of maybe bridged that gap, and I would say third, in terms of how selling has changed since the pandemic. If we look at roles within a company, kind of back to this revenue ecosystem narrative, like product or like engineering, that early on in my career, they were so detached from revenue generating conversations. They are in it. You know, as a company ourselves, we're building technology. We have a product-led growth method, which means we try to draw users into the product, get some value in the free product, have availability to new products that are paid, and have that be the engine for growth. So those are some key initiatives that I've seen. Again, this ambiance of revenue titles and revenue specific focus, the difficulty and changes in getting into prospect conversations, and then this move to product-led growth. Those are some areas I'm interested to hear what Stephanie has to say about this as well, because I know, Stephanie, you've been right in the middle of a lot of this as I have, and I'm curious if you've seen anything different, or if you'd even counter, some of the stuff I've said.
So I'm going to go in the opposite order. I'm going to meet you in the middle. I'm going to start with 10 years, and then I'm going to come like full circle to the last like 2 and a bit, if that works for you. I think it's really interesting, and I always date myself a little bit when I say this, but here we go. Over the last 15 plus years, I've seen like 3 distinct different sales climates. And if we think back to 15 years ago, that includes 2008, 2009, 2010, which was another like epic inflection point that we saw if you were in sales, especially if you were in some of the tech companies back then. It was very much this FOMO methodology in sales, right? It was all fear of missing out. And so it was, you want to buy this, customer, because if you don't, your 5 competitors just did, and you're going to get left behind. This is why you want the shiny new widget. Cool. We all know what happened in 2008, 2009, 2010, subsequently, and things changed. And we saw this shift in the years that followed that to more consultative selling, where budgets got slashed and we started looking to add value to our customer relationships based on a better understanding of their business. Talk to me, help me guide you through what it is that you're looking to attain for your business this year. So from FOMO to really consultative. And then it started to shift again. And I think what was cool is at the beginning of the pandemic, we started to see this shift to value selling, right? So your world just flipped upside down. Your sellers are now dispersed. You cannot be in the field with your sellers anymore. You are now in an entirely virtual world. Your sellers are selling in a virtual world 9 times out of 10. How can I, as your potential partner in your business, selling you a product or a service, bring you value to your function in your day that you don't have today. So we became very much a vitamin at the beginning of the pandemic, right? You have this need, it's a gap. I'm going to make your job, your life, your sales cycle better through adding this value that you don't have today. Now we see that flip back, right? And in the last few months, we're seeing some budgets get hit again. Well, now it's time to change. So the opportunity that I've seen in the shift starting, vitamins are great. If you have an extra $20, you're going to buy the fancy fish oils. But if you don't have the extra $20, you're now thinking about, what's the pain medication I need? What is the thing that I cannot live without? So we're shifting from value selling to pain killing now. And it's almost interesting because it's like an anticipation of pain. It's like the Tylenol or aspirin that you know you're going to need because you just ran way too far, and 4 hours from now, you're not going to be able to put your socks on by yourself. So what is it that you need today to make your sales team continue to hit targets in 4 months, despite having to, do some changes to headcount or make some cutbacks in terms of the tools and training that you have available? So I really see kind of this evolution of this fourth distinct stage coming through. So FOMO to consultative selling to value-based selling to now this pain killing. How can I help you get ahead of this pain that you're about to experience? Which to me is just a really interesting shift in how we can effectively partner with our prospects in the sales cycle.
Wow, that is fascinating.
That was a lot.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at the ideas like that, but I could see that. I can see that even among my clients that it has shifted a little bit from a concern about how are you making me money to how are you helping me to continue to operate? So yeah, very, very valuable. What do you think, Josh?
I love that arc, Stephanie, from FOMO to consultative to value-based selling, and now to kind of that pain killing proposition. It reminds me a little bit. I had a professor in graduate school. He wrote a book that's very popular among sellers. That's called "Never Split the Difference." And he was a former hostage negotiator. We got all sorts of stories, and one of the things he talked about, not only in the book but in our class, was this concept of loss aversion. And today, in this pain killing climate, we've even noticed a shift within our prospects that is less about winning more, but it's as much about losing less. And the context of that, we went to Dreamforce and exhibited as a company, and we were talking about the messaging and what might land really well. And we thought to really focus on this loss aversion and make sure we can remediate and kind of reduce some of the pain and allow companies to shine in the process. And to Stephanie's point, as proposal managers and as enablement leaders, whatever we can do to help our companies shine in the light of this loss aversion realm, we will be successful in terms of making sure that we're positioned as a company that is a more of a mission critical solution than a nice to have, right? To Stephanie's point. So I just loved, Stephanie, that arc. I've seen it myself, and I can agree that pain killing scenario is really live today.
All right. Well, then let's start busting some myths then, because I think that you've set the stage for where we're at in the where we're at in kind of the proto industry. So let's see what's going on. So first off, we hear this all the time, especially in the proposal team. Enablement is a cost center. Talk to me about this. Is it true? Is it false? Do you just burn money all over the place? And maybe if I get rid of you, I can make more money out there or something like that? Talk to me.
Okay, I got feelings on this, but I would love folks drop in the chat. I would love to hear from just anybody who is in the chat. Do you have a quick true or false? Enablement is a cost center. Is this how you feel like you are viewed at your organization? I certainly have some strong feelings about this, but I also know the realities that a lot of enablers face. because the challenge we have, yeah, so like Jennifer, absolutely, I agree with you, big old false. But here's the problem. If you aren't able to measure the impact that you're having to the business, you will be viewed as a cost center, like period. Because they're going to look at it and say, and if we look at some of the data that Sales Enablement Collective and SEP have come out with, even if we use round numbers and assume $100,000 for an enablement employee fully loaded, people are going to look at that and think that's $100,000 out the door. We could probably just train our own people. And unfortunately, I've heard that statement. And if you're not showing value that you're bringing to the organization in multiple ways, and I'll get to that in a second, you will be viewed as a cost center. Here's how you show value, in my opinion, on this one. And Josh, I'd love if you debate me on this, but I like to look at it in a couple of ways. You know, the traditional KPIs are all lagging, right? It's win rates, it's your average sales price, all that good stuff. Cool, but we can't own that. We can only influence it as enablement professionals. The things we can own are things like time to onboard, speed to ramp, certifications on time, volume of certifications, key product feature rollouts, education programs, those kinds of leading indicators. When you are delivering your KPIs to your senior leadership team, don't just focus on the dollars coming in that you impacted. Find at least one metric you can quantify for money you saved the business. This to me is where you can absolutely flip people from team like cost center to team, please don't ever leave me, I need you more than I realized. And what I mean by that is quantifying it. So for example, a new hire costing a sales manager, let's say on average, 6 hours per week of their time for the first 2 months. Now, give or take, depending on the complexity of the role and all that good stuff, but put a dollar value on that. What's your sales manager making at your organization? When you start to be able to report on a monthly basis, hey, sales enablement increased our average sales price with this program from, let's say, $1,000 to $1,100. Cool. Like that's money up. Awesome. But if you can also say, plus, we saved the organization an average of $250 off each of those sales because we were able to divert the workflow or make the workflow more efficient by having sales enablement do it. That is suddenly where you can say, well, we didn't just do it from 1,000 to 1,100. We actually did it from 1,000 to 1,350. Those kinds of metrics where you consider the lost opportunity cost to the business of enablement not being there, that is when you get into those moments where you can't argue it. You've put so much power behind the value for net new revenue and cost savings to the business that you start to be able to have that broader reach and bigger story. Josh, I would love to hear, how do you think about showing the value against the cost for enablement?
I think the proposition is right. You cannot have the revenue gain without the opportunity cost savings, because a good investor will always advise you to diversify your investment, right? If all your eggs as an enablement, as a proposal professional also are in one basket, then you're a little bit more expendable openly from a company. You are perceived as a back office operator and a cost center that is not producing what the company needs. So Stephanie's points here are right. When I was a head of enablement, I tried as much as I could to make a point. I reported directly to the CRO, as Stephanie does, and I had to be really careful to not just focus on, hey, look, our programs have increased the average sales price by X, or the shrunken the sales cycle by Y, but it was more about, what did we do in loss reduction, right? This goes back to the loss aversion stuff that we talked about. This is important for two reasons. One, in our roles as revenue enablers, we have to also make sure that there are ancillary costs to the work that we do. So for example, today, 40% of sales professionals attrit in 12 months or less from companies. That is a massive cost to organizations. A gentleman that I follow, his name is Chris Orlob. He was an early, I think he was the earliest sales pro at Gong and then built out a team, has some really interesting metrics about that. So what can we do to not only grow the revenue, shrink inefficiencies, and quantify that to the management team, but how can we make sure that the revenue is stabilized by people who are performing at their best abilities within a company and not bouncing, as there is a carousel these days, from one company to another? So I would just say 100% agree with the reality of quantifying winning metrics and also those loss aversion metrics that Stephanie talked about.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I have many clients and with large international sales teams, and you can definitely feel the difference between a well-trained salesperson who understands what they're doing, the value that they can bring to an organization, versus someone who just comes in fresh off the street. And that your point about attrition, again, I'm seeing salespeople get blown out all over the place because they're not given the proper level of support, to like really understand their industry and their marketplace and everything like that. Anyways, I agree with both of you on this. So let's take it a little bit further then. So I think that Stephanie touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of to broaden that for both of you a little bit more. But outside of like just presenting metrics, how do we put ourselves in a role as revenue generators? Like how do we demonstrate to companies and to executives, that we're critical to this function?
So I think there's two things. One is we're all people. So there's two different things that I would say. What do you do and what is it that you are? And what I mean by that is delivering programs, revamping a sales process, rolling out a new tech tool. Those are things you do. And that's great. And we traditionally attach revenue generation to those. But what are you? Who are you? What are your innate skills that you're good at that you can add to the business? Here's what I mean. If you have a natural affinity for the user experience, maybe you've got an eye for design, maybe you have a particular interest in marketing and go-to-market messaging. How are you getting involved with other teams beyond the direct sellers that you are charged with supporting? You can add value to the business in the broader scope of revenue. If you are somebody who's very comfortable with public speaking, maybe you start doing events and partnerships with the marketing team at your organization. Guess what? Your revenue generation impact is now impacting MQLs for the business, not just SQLs once they get to the SDRs. If you really have a passion for the customer experience, how can you be getting involved with your customer success team? Is there a voice of customer department at your organization? If there's not, what are your thoughts on leading one or leading a special project as part of sales enablement? Revenue generation for the business can go outside of the roles we directly support. The most interesting stories I've heard is when people have been out in the space representing their organizations in their full colors of who they are, your inner lizard, right? So some of us love neon pink. That would be me, everybody. I am a diehard extrovert, love to be in a room of people. And you hear these stories later where a lead comes in and they'll say, and I'll just pick a name out of the group here that I'm seeing, like, hey, I met Jessica at an event in Colorado. She just seemed like such an authentic person that really cared about how to train salespeople. And it stuck with me ever since. So I checked out your company and I'd love to see a demo. Those are the ways, some of the softer ways that you can bring who you are to the broader scope of revenue for the business. Will you tie it directly to one opportunity all the time? No, likely not. But it is amazing how many deals and how many initiatives you can get involved in for the business to drive more revenue or drive cost savings.
Okay. So what I'm hearing there is look beyond your define skills for your role, look beyond that, look to who you are as a person and bring that to the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And so, for example, maybe you are a solutions consultant
Mhm.
who really loves interacting with people. Solution consultant can become internal trainers. Sales enablement professionals can become people who actually create content that ends on the website as part of your go-to-market strategy. You are not pigeonholed to your role of just sales enablement unless that's what you want. I always liken sales enablement as the opportunity to be a trampoline.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is you put a kid in a place and I'm a parent, you say, okay, jump as high as you can. They're gonna give it everything they got. And they're gonna, like, you can hype them up on sugar, whatever else, give them a reward. They're gonna jump as high as they can.
Mhm.
But having a trampoline under that person that connects to all the different important points gives them more mobility to be able to go up. It gives them the confidence, it gives them the velocity, it gives them the drive, and it gives them the energy to go further. And as I think about enablement and in the context of proposal response, which is part of why we're here today talking about this, it's another venue for revenue generation. You are not limited to just training and supporting SDRs, BDRs, and AEs. Your potential as enablers is so much bigger than that.
Okay. Fantastic. We have a question in the chat, but Josh, before we jump to that, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Yes, I think we've all been around the attribution junkies in companies, meaning, people wanting to take credit for everything. And, I love Stephanie. I loved your point about it's really about, it's not as much about what we do, but it is about who we are. And your unique identity and purpose as a human with wonderful skill sets is really what we need to shine within a company. It's difficult sometimes to quantify that and to, wrap that up and, put it out in front of everybody. But I agree that, if you think of this again as part of the larger revenue ecosystem, you have to be opportunistic about where problems lie, right? The greatest revenue professionals are the greatest opportunists in terms of identifying gaps in the market, identifying gaps within their prospects and within their customers that they can go remediate with their unique products, solutions, and skill sets. And I think that applies really well within your own company. You have to be really opportunistic about what is a gap that is something that you are uniquely qualified to fill openly. If you don't feel like you're uniquely qualified, but you have a desire to do that, there's nothing stopping you. The term leader too often gets associated with titles and rank. The reality is you can be the leader within your tribe and gain a following within your company by doing that. I'm interested with this question from Jessica. If I could take a first cut at that, Ben,
Absolutely.
to
Do you want me
talk
to
through
read
this.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, I could read it really quick.
Go.
She said, "What if everything you've attempted to do has been rejected by the sales team? How do you attempt to validate your role and do your job as an SEM in marketing without stepping on sales toes?" My first cut, and I'm super interested to hear, Stephanie, what you have to say here is this can be a very difficult situation if there is not support in other parts of the company for what you do. And often there has to be a great level of patience with what you're putting out there and your ability to quantify and communicate the value of that effort to the broader team. And I would have instances, and I was coming into a sales enablement role as a former senior director of sales at other companies, high growth companies. And sometimes what I would say or what I would propose or what I would do would be really scoffed at and questioned. And I learned over time that in some cases, it was a great deal of care, the level of scrutiny on some of the stuff that I was doing. In other cases, it was because there was high ego that was baseless. And you really just have to understand the audience. My take to you, Jessica, would be, um, we know and you know that what you're offering is of high quality and will greatly benefit the parties that you're talking about. And the best that you could do is get yourself out there, get audience, get sponsors. Often what I tell people too is one of the best things I did was within an organization, I got 2 really strong executive sponsors or even senior sponsors on the sales front to buy into what I was doing and then help communicate that to some of the people that may have had a problem with what I was doing. But those are some insights that I've faced, or from what I've faced, that I think would be helpful. Find some sponsors, really inherently consider what you do with the value that it does have, despite what other people say, and continue on in a persevering way to get whatever content or best practices or thought leadership out there. And then we can just live with what the response is, because we've done our very best there. Stephanie, what do you think?
So I just posed the question to Jess if the function is new. So Jess, just quickly, do you have a sales enablement charter in place today? Give you a second to respond there. No. So a sales enablement charter is where you need to start. If you don't have one already, now's your time to do one. A sales enablement charter, and there's different ways people cut this. Okay. I've seen ones that are 20 pages long. Listen, ain't nobody got time for that. Okay. Kudos to those who do. I don't. To me, the core of your sales enablement charter needs to align on a couple of things. The first thing being, what are you responsible for? And that should be 2 to 3 sentences. What are you responsible for? And a sample of that could be, enablement is responsible for the training and onboarding of new hires to get them effectively up to ramp and the support of ongoing product launches, period. Okay, really, really clear. The next thing you need to have in your charter is who your key stakeholders are. And by that, I mean, who are the key decision makers that you need to make sure you have alignment with and approval from to roll something out. Who decides whether it was effective and necessary? That list is your key to know who's going to ultimately be deciding the value that your team's bringing to the table. The next piece of your charter, and again, I'm simplifying, but I just want to have it be focused on 3 things for you, Jess, is what are your key priorities for the business for the next 6 months? Typically, charters are a year long. Don't do that. Right now, things are too volatile. Do it for 6 months max. Sit down with your leader and the key stakeholders that you and your leader have identified in the previous section are the gatekeepers for the value to the business, and get their input on what is the 1 to 2 most critical things that your team needs from me. You're going to get a short list and you're going to work through that and define what's the highest priority and what does success look like. And so your charter is going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to make sure that you're proactively identifying what everybody agrees is most important that you do to support their team. That way, you're not wasting your time, resources, and everything else doing something for them to later say, that wasn't important to me. The other thing that that's going to do is it's going to open up the conversation that's really collaborative about priorities. So in this case, let's say Josh was my sales director and Josh was like, listen, I need all my team at 100% quota attainment. Of course, he's going to say that. That's totally reasonable to expect an enablement person to be responsible for. Okay, Josh, help me understand what their challenges are today, why they're not all at 100% quota attainment. Let's get real specific. Let's look at the data. What's your win rate and where are things dropping off? All right, Josh, it looks like we're losing a lot of deals progressing through the sales cycle at, the solution stage. So when we're actually defining the solution for them. Does that seem right to you, Josh? Does that feel right? That's what the data is telling me. It then gives you the chance, and this is, sales back and forth. Josh to say, yeah, you know what, actually, Steph, you're right. That's what the data says. And it's true. I listen to these calls and they're terrible. All right, awesome. So what I'm hearing is our problem is solution definitions. We've got a widespread opportunity for the team where they seem confident in what they're saying, but they're not able to convey the value of the solution to the customer. Would you agree, Josh? Josh is going to smile and nod, because how can he not? And then we're going to sit down and say, okay, so Josh, here's what I want to do for you. Based on what we've identified and based on the fact that, you've told me, yeah, this is absolutely a problem. I want to put together a 3-step training program for your team. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with an assessment of where they're at today. And we're going to measure in their last 30 days. Did they deliver their value impact statement in that call? Well, yes or no. We're going to get a percentage. I'm going to deliver 3 training sessions to you that I'm going to roll out over the next 3 months, 1 a month. And at the end of each of those, I'm going to do that same measurement. And that's on me. And I'm going to be able to tell you, we've moved it from here to here. And at the end of that 3 months, Josh, we're going to be able to say these 3 training sessions did effectively impact their ability to deliver this impact statement by X amount. Now, for Josh, he's going to hear that and he's going to go, okay, you think you can do that, Steph? Like, have at it. I support you. Now, here's the key. Make sure you align on the definition of success. What you don't want is to move the dial by 6 or 7% with those 3 sessions. And Josh go, nah, that wasn't even impactful. No, impact your final statement, work together on what your goal is, because it's going to determine what you put in those 3 training sessions and how much energy and resources you invest. So that was just a quick off the fly. And Jess, I know I owe you a response separately, just on a personal level, for a quick connect, but hopefully that was helpful to you as an example of what you want to be doing as one of the key activities to put forward your sales enablement charter. But that is absolutely where anyone should be starting right now if you don't have one in place already.
I love that stuff. What I liked best was the what I like to call voodoo, but honestly is just good psychology about thinking about, like, how do I get this onto a collaborative stance? Like, I know someone is trying to shut me down. How do I get this on a positive stance moving forward, where like people just are forced to, like, yeah, this is good points, and how do I get involved in this process, and how do I make this work? And I did love the measurement of success. I agree. Like, if you can deliver amazing quality, and then if you haven't made that confirmation at the end, then people are just like, nah, whatever, you did a little bit of work. But I really appreciate that. Really fantastic stuff there. All right. I do want to move it along. We are into the session, and I want to make sure that we cover some of the main points. So listen, another true false to fire at you. Proposals belong in the solution. Probably no is my guess, but you let me know. Josh, Stephanie, anyone?
Yeah, I'll kick this one off.
Sure.
I've got some pretty strong thoughts about this, so I hope I don't scare anybody away. But absolutely not. We work as a company with lots of proposal teams. I have led proposal teams, and for us, the best operating teams on the proposal front have some tie directly into the revenue generating team. Be it some of the best teams I've seen are reporting directly within the enablement function. So their boss is the head of revenue enablement. I've seen proposal teams report directly to the sales team, which openly, it's not a guarantee of success. In fact, I think there's a lot of difficulty in treating a proposal team like sales reps. The deals are not as transactional. They're not as quickly qualifiable. They take a lot more in terms of opportunity cost and time. And finally, in terms of alignment to the solution team, the issue for us is the content of the proposal ends up aligning more to the content of technical documents that don't tell the story of the why behind your solution, its power to align to the requirements, succeed in fulfilling and really remediating, to Stephanie's point, the pain that is there within the prospect. And in my mind, those that really succeed in the proposal world have direct alignment on clear product market fit, messaging of that fit, and the associated pains and priorities that come along with it. Revenue enablement is the vehicle to generate a lot of that, along with product marketing. And then third, as it relates to the go-to-market mindset, at least as it exists within a lot of companies we've worked with, is quite distinct on the product and engineering front from the revenue enablement team. I think any company can have success on the proposal function, being in different departments, if you will. But my concern mostly is this team and these individuals have to be as closely linked to the message builders, those people who can see around the corners and have insights about why you're really winning and why you're really losing, and really have access to all the resources available within that team. So I've got some more thoughts there, but I want to hear what Stephanie has to say as well. I don't know if there's a right answer, at least from my vantage point, but I've just seen the success in terms of not only revenue growth, but win rates be much higher within proposal teams being maybe housed outside of the solutions team.
Look at her.
I'm ready. Okay. Okay, I got a lot of feelings about this. Okay, I will boil it down and be as succinct as possible. So Lupio actually did their 2023 trends report where we went out and analyzed hundreds of thousands of RFP responses. Here's what we found. 39% of revenue at respondents' organizations was touched by sales response functions. 39%. 4 out of every $10 companies generated were touched by proposal managers. You are the top sales rep in terms of revenue influence and generation. If you are bringing in, whether you're directly bringing in or touching 40% of the revenue, you are a seller, like it or not. And part of being a seller means you need to be thinking through the entire sales process. So where do you fit? How can you have more of those engaging conversations? If you are in a solutions team, which is often performing very technical, very project-based functions, right? Where it's like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do this little segment, and I'm going to go out. You are, as a proposal response manager, losing out on the huge opportunity to learn about the entire customer experience, to learn about the full revenue cycle. And as an enablement team, if you weren't part of it, you'd be missing out on the full cycle of information sharing. Here's what I mean. Josh hit on this earlier, sales enablement transitioning to revenue enablement. Well, what that difference is going from traditionally new business sellers being BDRs or SDRs and AEs to the fuller duration of the revenue cycle. So now often includes customer success. In my case, and in a growing portion of revenue enablement leaders, it's also now including RFP response. Why? Because that is part of the sales process. It is a key part of the sales cycle. And if we think about the buyer's journey, they engage with the website or they get cold called, they have an initial conversation, they work through qualification and discovery, they build a solution, and an offering is presented back to them with a price point. They then evaluate that offering. They move forward with the sale, they go into the customer success team, and they become an engaged customer. If out of those 5 or 6 stages, you pull out one of them, you've not only isolated yourself as a proposal response team where you now don't have direct line of sight what's happening before and after you for the customer journey, but you've also created a disconnect for everyone else along that customer journey path. So now the AE doesn't know what happened behind the magic curtain with the security questionnaire getting responded to because, oh, that's over on a different team. I'm not invested in that. That's happening over there. And likewise, the customer success team doesn't have that line of communication. When you have sales response living in sales enablement, it means you are embedded in the sales team because no seller sells alone. You are embedded in the sales team that is supporting that customer's buying journey. But even better than that, it means that you are already having a seat at the table for ongoing training, insight, and enablement conversations that you just can't get if you're part of any other team.
Mm-hmm.
A sales response manager raised her hand to me and said, hey, I noticed something with some of our AEs in this segment. In that same conversation, we were able to tag in another member of our team who trains our AEs. And she was like, I'm on it. I'm going to go talk to those 5 people today. There is no send it up through a manager, send it over here. That all just happens in a natural conversation because you're embedded in the ultimate goal of generating revenue and understanding the full life cycle for the customer.
All right. Fabulous. Fabulous. I really like that. And I think you just answered this question as well about like how can housing and in proposal or the enablement drive this function. So like right there, that casual kind of, hey, we've got an instant feedback loop, and we can take action on something right away. Josh, did I cut out something that you wanted to jump in on there? I saw you nodding a little bit. So
No, I can't help but nod. This is great. I love the tactical function there, and part of that conversation. I foresee a continued movement of proposal functions into revenue enablement roles. And you could even see potential titles of proposal managers changing to better reflect that. We're seeing that already in a couple areas. My take for everybody here is just make sure that if you are an enablement professional, you are embracing your proposal peers within the company. Make sure they're successful, provide as much resourcing as possible, because I promise you that a lot of them feel isolated and left out and sequestered and in a corner. And you can be the catalyst for not just enabling them to be successful, but befriending them and helping them be in a position to win. And that's where, from my vantage point, I've always viewed revenue enablement as building the revenue generating unit within a company. Everybody who touches money that's flowing into the company should go through the revenue enablement house, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm starting to see some of this behavior even in among engineers. Like sometimes I have engineer SMEs answering questions, and they're like, "Look, I want to say yes to this because I know that's what sales wants, but it's going to create like a really bad experience for the customer. How can we address this?" Right? And that's the conversation you want to have, not this like continuous fight between SMEs and sales saying, well, no, you need to say yes, and them standing firm and being like, no, I need to say no, right? Like you want to create that kind of, okay, well, what can we talk about? How can we move that forward? So really appreciate that thought process. And honestly, I wish somehow there was like the equivalent of sales enablement for procurement teams, because lately I've been seeing, especially in municipal government, a lot more like super technical RFPs coming out, but they don't really have like a clear way of addressing like what are we actually selling. I'm responding to one right now, 34 templates, and there's no narrative document requirement to be sent, and I'm like, how is their steering committee gonna like get this? And I feel for that executive, because either they have to kind of like wash their hands and say, yeah, I've hoped that all my operations team have put in the correct number of widgets to make everything work with our vision, or they have to like scroll through massive amounts of technical documentation to figure out what they actually are trying to purchase here. So anyways, all right, really, really, really powerful points. We are closing in on the end of it. We're about 9 minutes out from the top of the hour. Does anyone have some super solid questions? It doesn't even have to be super solid. Does anyone have some interesting questions for Josh and Stephanie? They are experts in the industry. I'm going to leave it open for a little bit. But yeah, just really powerful stuff. There are been a lot of good takeaways for me in my business and what I would like to drive into the community. Like I'm really loving this painkiller idea. Josh, I really love this idea of like this holistic revenue organization and creating revenue units inside the business. I really have to kind of take that home and think about that a little bit. So, and here we go. Is there a specific report in Salesforce that can show how we generate revenue? I'm not a Salesforce expert.
Jennifer, are you asking from an enablement perspective or from a proposal response perspective? We'll give you a second there. Enablement. So Salesforce, it gets pretty difficult. There are things you can do if you have Gong or Chorus or a similar recording platform. You can leverage smart trackers and tie that to opportunities in Salesforce. That is a good way that I found to do it. Doing that, for example, let's say you roll out a training initiative on a specific, I don't know, new value drivers, new product feature, you can actually have in all the call recordings where it'll listen to it. And then you can tie those direct calls to the outcome of opportunities from Salesforce. Salesforce in and of itself, you would otherwise be looking at creating a custom field against an opportunity and then actually just creating a report that pulls the value based on the custom field. It does get messier. So it would depend exactly what you are trying to measure for how you're impacting revenue. You know, a super simple example is if you know that for this quarter, per your sales enablement charter, your number one goal is to drive renewal rates. Then what you can do is you can have your point in time data from Salesforce, and it's always living, so generate it point in time. Get it for the period before, up until day 0 of when you run your initiative, and then create a new filter on that report for the rolling 90 days, rolling 30 days, whatever the length of your program is, to pull the exact same fields. That is a generalized way where you can compare something like win rate based on a specific opportunity type, in this example, renewals. But it really depends, Jennifer, on what it is that you want to measure exactly.
All right, perfect. We were getting some thanks in the chat, so I'm assuming that that's the answer we're looking for. But I feel for Jennifer on that one too. I think they're stuck on what they want to measure. That's so hard. I think among executives and even operational units, that it's just really trying to hone in on like, what's the metric that actually matters here? What do we really care about? So
I'd say the shortest answer, just for anybody, is typically we see enablement, rightly or wrongly, evaluated on our ability to influence. So again, not own, but influence sales cycle length, which yes, you can just do a quick Google. That is very easy to do in Salesforce. We are also typically measured on average sales price, which again, you can do that easily. And then competitive win rates would be another one. If you have a field in Salesforce where the AE or opportunity owner indicates if it was a competitive situation, then that's easy to do also. Each of those reports, once you just, and again, the beauty of Salesforce is so widely used, you can just Google that and it'll give you a quick demo. You can throw 4 or 5 of those reports into a dashboard and have that email to yourself every Monday morning so that it's super easy to measure the lagging indicators of impact to close deals.
Okay, fantastic.